Guys, I just wanted to talk about real quick a, a, an unfair criticism of my of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that criticism is that our doctrine is hard to nail down, or that we're constantly shifting the goalposts. Um, and I totally understand how people come away with this idea, but I think it is suffers from a little bit of not, don't look at the the beam in thy brother's eye and not notice the mote in thine own, or whatever, the other way around, I think. um, so like my first, like, I'm gonna actually listen. I don't want to start with that point first. So my first thing I want to talk about is just the idea of our doctrine and you know is it really hard to nail down? And I don't think the truth is that it is. Our general authority recently just said, like, our doctrine's not found in one paragraph of an old manual. It's spoken frequently and and by many people. Um, so, like, if you're looking for the doctrine of our church and you're looking for what we believe in, you don't have to go look in all the nooks and crannies, because, and like, let's be clear, Kolob, the only doctrinal thing that we actually know about that is that it's a star that is near to God, and that it rules over all the other stars. Other than that, we don't know what it is. It could be a black hole. Like, I don't know what it is. Nobody knows what it is. Um, and so people get this idea that our religion's all about Kolob, and it's like, no, that's like in a nook somewhere, under a pile of books. There's like this, you very bottom, there's like literally a page that says Kolob. It rules over all the other stars, and that's it. Like, there's no, I mean, there's a few things about time, and how time is relative to Kolob and stuff, but like, it's not where God lives. Like, and so yeah, like, so I think people research our church in the wrong places a lot, and then come in and notice that a lot of things are different than what they thought, and assume that that's us changing the goalposts or something. But I also understand that we have changed things in the past, and a great example of this is Brigham Young talking about blood atonement. um there are other things Brigham Young talked. Oh wait, no, not blood atonement. That's also a good example. But a better example is the Adam God theory. So Brigham Young talked about the Adam God theory, and as far as I understand, it's just this weird theory where Adam was also God because he's the father of all things or whatever. And anyway, it's not true. Um, and he talked about this in public settings in groups of people. Um, But I think something that needs to be made clear is that he did not say it was revelation. He never said that. He never preached it as revelation. He never said that this is what we believe. It was always just a theory to him. And then, so the reason this is such a great example, though, is because years later, you have Spencer W. Kimball in General Conference, or maybe it's Joseph F. Smith, one of those two, comes out and says, we like the do Adam God theory is off the table. Do not believe in that. That is false doctrine. We do not believe in that. That is not part of our canon. And so I totally understand. Like, from an outsider's perspective, you've got one prophet saying, "Yeah, this could be a thing," and then another prophet saying, "No, it is not a thing." Um, uh, so like, I understand, but like, at the same time, that's like a thing that's under a book somewhere, that's in a nook and a cranny. Why are you looking there for the doctrine of our church in the first place? Like, are you looking for something to pick out? Um, I always say you, like the viewer is a bad or something. If you're watching this, I'm not, that's just how I talk. Okay. Sorry. I'll try to be more, um, judicious with my wordage. um, so, uh, Yeah, like there's a clear example of something changing. Another great example, and I actually got this from God Loves Mormons, which is I think an evangelical or a Protestant who is doing exactly what I'm talking about. He's going into all these nooks and crannies and finding little things that, and then presenting them as if they're big and important. Um, in something that we call lectures on faith. It used to be part of the Doctrine of Covenants, but it's not anymore. It's this little pamphlet series where Joseph Smith was trying to talk about some core tenets of our beliefs. And in there, he says that the Father has a personage of spirit, and the Son has a body of flesh and bone. And then he pointed out to me, like, oh, but you guys today believe that the Father has a body of flesh and bone, and the Son, or the Son has a body of flesh and bone, and the Father also does. Um, and to be honest, that did catch me off guard at first. I was like, "Whoa, we do?" So then I looked into it. And believe it or not, the person who actually introduced the doctrine of the body of the Father having a body of flesh and bone as well was Joseph Smith. So like his whole point was like you guys believe something that you didn't believe back then, and it's like, well, actually Joseph Smith is the one who introduced this doctrine, and he's the one who talked about the doctrine before. So it sounds like what actually happened was Joseph Smith didn't understand something, and then he got further light and knowledge and was able to, rectify that before the church, before 100 years later, when we're trying to say something like, oh, Mary's not part of of our worship. Jesus Christ is the reason for salvation, not Mary. Saves us from the embarrassment of doing that. That's a joke, okay? Like I'm not. If you're Catholic and you get offended by that, I'm sorry. It's just a joke. Um, but like I think my point with that joke though is pretty clear. Like we are not the only institution that has made changes or has had to clarify things, um, to make it more obvious what we believe. Um, am I going to say that the church has always believed the exact same thing from the beginning? Absolutely not. The core doctrines have always been the same, and then the little off branches have all had theories and ideas and things that get put in places they shouldn't be, like the whole planet thing. I talked about that in a misconception video. People did talk like in wards about planets, and getting to rule as gods. And there is just no doctrinal proof of that. So while it was taught in some settings, it has never been taught by the leadership of the church as doctrine. It is, yeah, like that. And the other thing I want to talk about is that I just don't think people understand prophets really. And I think it's because we're the only church that has, and I know that everyone who's not in our church is like, well, you just believe you have a prophet. That's not a real prophet. Um, he is, I assure you he is. But I can't prove that to you. That's a personal thing. Um, which is greater than evidence, by the way. In case I don't make that clear on my channel, a personal witness of Jesus Christ and his gospel is always better than any sort of evidence you're going to get. In fact, the greatest evidence you're ever going to receive is a personal testimony brought on by a personal experience. Um, there's no amount of talking I can do that can explain, that can make you believe. There I go with you again. That can make someone believe in the church. Um, anyway, rewind. Prophets are not perfect. And that's made clear in the Bible, of all places, but also, our modern prophets today make mistakes. Joseph Smith is no exception, and because he's under such a high level of scrutiny, it's more clear what mistakes he made, because people were looking for them. Um, something, like President Dallin H. Oaks today, our prophet today, I I haven't heard anything bad about him ever. Like I haven't heard mistakes he's made. I haven't heard anything like that. Um, And I think honestly it's because he's under less scrutiny. People aren't like evaluating every aspect of his life um, in a public setting. Like I know there are people who evaluate every aspect of his life, and they probably do know about some mistakes. But like let's go back to the Bible. Like Peter denied Christ 3 times. Those are sins. Those are mistakes. Those are things that he shouldn't have done that he did. Moses was not allowed into the promised land because he gave people water when he wasn't supposed to. Like he used the power of God to give his people water and without asking permission first. And like his punishment was that he wasn't allowed to see the promised land. Which is actually pretty tame next to exaltation, but I'm not going to complain. So I'm just saying, like, we have examples of prophets making mistakes and being real people. Um, and so I think people who approach prophets with this idea that they're perfect beings or that anything they say can be taken as revelation, like you just can't do that. Like prophets are normal people most of the time. They um in fact, we don't. I think every prophet in our church has made major changes at least once, but it's not like an everyday thing. Um, like missionary age has been adjusted. Pretty temple announcements were just recently adjusted. We did announce them in general conference, but now we're not. We're going back to the way it was before because I don't think they were announced in general conference earlier in our history. But like I think someone could see my point that like prophets definitely make mistakes and they're not functioning as revelatory people all the time. Um and I love this is my favorite part about this whole idea is that Galatians 1:8 is actually a great example of this. Paul says, though we or an angel, and I talked about this in another video. So if you want to see my Galatians video, that's one of the shorts I have up. And I don't have a lot of videos right now, so it's easy to find. Um, but yeah, he says we, like they can make mistakes. Even Paul admits that prophets are not perfect people, that they don't, like so people always look at Joseph Smith or Brigham Young and they go, "Well, look at these crazy things they did. I can't believe that they're a prophet." And it's like, okay, but like if you're going to hold them to that level of scrutiny, I think if you went back in time and lived with Peter, James, John, Paul, I think you'd be disappointed. Like I really think you would. I honestly do not think that they were 100% amazing people all the time. They probably made mistakes. They probably did things they shouldn't have done. Especially since Jesus Christ is establishing his new church and changing a lot of the stuff that had been around for like thousands of years at that point. And this is something that applies to our church too. Um, Joseph Smith, when he started the church, was not a member of our church. I know this is hard to believe. He was not a member of our church before he established it. The original Quorum of the 12 are all a bunch of guys who have spent the majority of their life in a different religion. Um, and some of them not even the same religion. Um, but I think quite a few of them are Protestant, I believe. Um, but that's besides the point. The point is when you have this new church with people bringing their doctrine from their old church into the new church because they don't have anything else. Like because they don't like when you get baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you don't just get like a data download and you get all the information you need to know. You learn line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. You keep learning from one thing to the next. And it's a constant process. Um, and I think it'd be ludicrous to believe that Peter, James, and John were in a different situation or that they had access to more knowledge than it's actually very comparable. You've got these guys who were originally Jews. Well, I mean, they still were, but like they're Jews and they believed Jewish religion for a majority of their life. And then Jesus comes along and says, "Let's start this new church." They're in the exact same shoes that Joseph Smith and his friends were in. Like, and I'm just saying as an example to compare the two. Um, so like I honestly believe that if you went back in time and talked to Peter, James, and John and observed how their lives went and got full documentation on everything they were doing, it would be eerily similar to Joseph Smith and starting the new church. Not because they're the same church. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not using that. I just want to clarify. I'm not using that as a metric to try and say that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is true. I'm using that as a metric to say we have an actual example of someone starting a church that is different from all the others and then seeing how that went. Just because Jesus left. Jesus left and the disciples were left alone and had to manage the whole church. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't visit them or anything, but I'm saying that these people were mortals and it probably was very similar situations to Joseph Smith and his compatriots. The only difference being that Joseph Smith had access to a lot better technology, like the printing press, um, which allowed him to, you know, keep the church put together better than they did. In fact, I think the evolution of technology over time has actually enabled churches to be more consistent than they were before. Um, which is my my whole point with this is that people who come in and look at our church and go, "You guys are shifting the goalposts. You guys are hard to nail down. I can't figure out what you guys do. Um, you guys are inconsistent to what your early history was." It's like, so are you. like, these people are like they don't. They're reading into it with presentism, you know. Like anyway, sorry, that was my child. um, which is a wonderful feature about these videos is that I can make that blur effect. Anyway, so I hope this helps. I hope you guys can understand why I think it's a ridiculous argument to come and say that we're the ones shifting goalposts or that we're hard to pin down. We're new. We're not doing any. Our understandings of the church of God and who He is are evolving. Better. They're not getting worse. They're evolving for better. We're better able to understand things. And I honestly think that we're close to the second coming. I'm not sure when. I'm not one of those people that's like it's on Tuesday, April 14th. But if it was, that'd be pretty cool, right? Um, but like, you know, I'm not one of those people, but I believe the signs of the times are here. So I think we will all get a chance to meet with the Savior and truly discover who He is, and like we'll see how He is. And I'm gonna go right now and say it. My church might in my belief is the truest and most right church on the planet. It has the most knowledge, the most and the authority to act in God's name. I do not believe that we know everything, and I do not believe that you know I don't believe that Jesus is going to come down and say, "By the way, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." He's just going to have his church, and we will be a part of that, and a lot of other faiths will be a part of that. Like we're not the only faith that's going to be accepted by Christ. At the second coming. I'm not saying all of not there's members of my church that are probably not gonna make it. I'm not naming any names. But there's members of other faiths that are going to make it, they're going to be, and I think I don't think there's a person on earth right now, you know, I shouldn't say not a person, but like I think the odds of someone going to hell are very hard. It's a very hard criteria to reach, and so I think most people are going to go to heaven. Um, just because judgment isn't up to me. But I think that Jesus is a loving God who understands people's situations, and if you never had a chance, that's not fair, and He knows that. And He won't hold that against you. I said you again. Sorry, listener, if you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or you're a Protestant that is absolutely set that you're going to heaven. I'm not saying you're not. um, Anyway, I hope this helps. I hope you guys understand a little bit more about my faith, and my views on it. And I hope that you understand that nobody is perfect. No religion has not shifted their goalposts at one point or another. Everyone has made these mistakes because we're people. We're fallible. We make mistakes, and that's just how it is. I'll see you guys in the next one.